That's fantastic. And you made it a reality because in 2023 you won the election,
Yes.
but the system blocked your path to becoming prime minister.
Yes, backed by the people, blocked by the system.
Yeah. Can you take us back to the moment that you realized you would not be allowed to lead? What went through? Sorry,
Sure.
let's.
Please continue.
So, what went through your mind, and what did you learn about like power, democracy, and yourself in that moment?
I think the most interesting part of your question is what went through my mind, I guess.
Yeah.
Here we go again. That was what went through my mind. But the previous part of your questions was about when did I realize? I think there was no particular moment that I realized because I anticipated it all along. Throughout the past 2 decades in Thai politics, 30-something parties dissolved, 250-something politicians banned. So this is a systematic thing. It's not a personal thing that only happened to me or to happen to my party. So because of that, personally, I always had that scenario, or I also had, I was doing scenario analysis of maybe 10% or 15% winning the election and not being to govern. That 10 or 15% were election outcome and election result does not have to be the same in this country. And then various spectrums, whether I could, I win, I form, I didn't get blocked, I govern, and then, I got removed by and, appointed judicial power, like how the current prime minister is facing, or the one before her. So it's a revolving door of leadership. It's a revolving door of premiership, and no political party in this kind of systematic problem have that kind of focus to really deal with the challenges that Thailand or ASEAN is facing at the moment because of that kind of deadlock by design, judicial coup, lawfare, and violence in the courtroom, rather than what you and I know as an ASEAN and Latin American, or maybe that you understand that that democracy used to get stopped by military tanks on the street. So Thailand's been democracy for 93 years, maybe the past 70 years, 13 military coups, yeah. So it's very high number that democracy gets stopped all the time, but it was back in the days where social media was not present. So that means you could just roll tanks on the street and then you take away the constitution and tear it apart and draft your own. That's the old school way. And then since 2006 until 2025, that's when they started to understand that that method was too loud. So we keep this on the left hand. We might not do it yet. Let's do this one where, we use this kind of complicated system to make sure that if the election result is not as pleasant, then the outcome can be different using a pointed mechanism. And I'm going to finish your question with a sentence. It's the politics of appointed versus elected. It's a competitive autocracy that allows election once in a while. Then you get that lower house that is from election. But during my time, the upper house was appointed by the military junta. So it's a proxy war. It's a struggle of appointed versus elected. The judges were either directly appointed by the military junta or indirectly appointed. So that's the thing that you have to fight against at the moment. Whether maybe a nine opinions of judges against 14 million votes. So that's kind of competitive autocracy that allows elections once in a while, but not a true democracy yet. So we got to fight for it.
No, thank you so much, Vita, for explaining this in such an easy way. Sometimes when we're not from Thailand, we don't necessarily understand all these things. And what you're telling us is really revealing and really interesting And thank you for putting it in such
Thank you.
easy words.
Thank you.
You wrote a book,
Yes.
The Almost Prime Minister.
Yes, that's the easiest version of explaining who I am to the American audience, at least when I go to Boston.
That's good. We are really expecting the English version to
Yes,
come out
yes, it
soon.
will come out.
What was the hardest chapter to write?
I think for the whole book, the most difficult thing was to decide what to leave out and what to include, what to exclude and what to include. It was about our election victory from snap election through party dissolution. So it's about a 2-year time frame of political memoir. Like I felt like there was a gap between what really went through my mind and what's being portrayed on the media, including international media also. So lots of House of Cards. We're talking about Netflix drama of House of Cards level. That I wanted to really include in the book, and then I felt like maybe that's something that we need to exclude. And I don't want to be the kind of people who talk behind other people's back because they didn't have a chance to argue back and things like that. So that was really the most difficult part. Macro wise, when you ask for a specific chapter, so micro wise, the publisher, came up with the idea asking me to write about, the last day of my ban. So 9 years, 364th day, that night before I can run for office again after the ban. That was something that was intellectual stimulating, and I really had to, pretend that now my daughter is not 9 but 19. She's ready to vote. Her generation is ready to vote. I'll be 54 rather than 44. Will I be stronger? Will I be weaker? How did I spend my time during that 10-year pause? So it really forced my imagination to really imagine what it's like when I'm, 53 years old, going 54, ready to run again. How vigorous would I be and things like that. And that's the last chapter of the book. And that was a good mental exercise for me.
I am sure that you will go back to that chapter at least once a year for the next 10 years.
Maybe.
To remind you. Maybe in 10 years you will say like, okay, let's see how.
It's a wonderful thing. You guys all should do it. It's a self-care feeling that, sometimes you look towards what's ahead of you for the next 5 minutes or 1 hour or 1 week. But if you look in a long term and a lot of things that you're worrying now, it doesn't really matter. So it's a self-healing process writing.
Yeah. After writing that book, do you wish more people understood about what it feels like to serve a bigger cause than yourself, even when you're prevented from fulfilling the mandate given to you by the people?
Oh, absolutely. I think the objective of writing a political memoir like that, it's not a biography, so it's not a story about just my life. But, we're trying to archive the facts of what happened during that time for that 2-year period, because lots of things happened during that time. And people might forget, or people might, try to use misinformation operation to change the facts and things like that. So we try to archive it. And of course, my personal feelings to it. But the objective of writing the book is that when people read that chapter or a particular page, they will think about what happened that day, what they felt like after the victory, what they felt like when they were going to the ballots, what they thought about when they were campaigning or volunteering and things like that, whether they voted for me or not. But so it's a personal story that is being translated in the reader's story. Once they read this, they'll remember, that campaign rally in the center of Bangkok, not far away from here. And they'll remember whether they were watching from Facebook, from YouTube, or they were in the crowd, and the kind of feeling that I was feeling on stage. Did they have the same feeling or different feeling? So it's a platform between my feelings towards others' feelings. And if I'm trying to show, fear of failure as well as hope in the right equilibrium in that book, and hopefully people would feel that kind of thing too when they are writing about this, and the chance of, begin again in Thai democracy compared to Myanmar, compared to Venezuela, or democracy in hard places. Yeah. And they feel like, okay, when next time comes, I'm going to return to ballot and make sure that my voice is heard, rather than voter fatigue, which is by design, by the way. Autocrats are very good at this. They're trying to dramatize politics. They're trying to make politics as dirty and as boring as possible. So voter fatigue by design is an autocratic playbook that they're trying to do all around the world. And it was actually idea report, and I remember the number by a German gentleman. I can't remember his name. He was a PhD something, and he was saying, or one of the alliance, I'm not sure if it's actually from India, but the voting turnout all around the world used to be about 60 something 15 years ago. And in last year's report, it went down to about 50 something. Yeah. In Britain, it was about 50 something. In Japan, it was about 50 something. During my time, it was 76 in Thailand. In South Korea, after an autocratic attempt in December, 82%. So that kind of voting turnout is so important to the democracy in terms of representation, in terms of inclusion, in terms of the probability to win for social democrats like us as well, where we don't buy votes or we don't have any patronage system to make sure people come out. Those are the things that I hope that the book will remind them of the things that we had accomplished, that we had done, and we'll do it again against all odds. So that was the objective of the Almost Prime Minister.
That's very interesting that you're mentioning this, because sometimes we look at the politician, sometimes we look at the person, and we forget all the people that also had hopes for these people to win, to see the change, to see how the country can look different, better or worse, different. We don't know.
Yes.
So what you're talking about is not just like your emotions. And I really appreciate that you bring that it's also about people's emotions, that were disillusioned, maybe felt like a betrayal, maybe felt that they did it again, that feeling of what do we do?
Exactly.
And I think that here the most important thing is to see how you or different political parties deal with this. It's about like empowering what you were saying.
Yes.
Your daughter is now 9. She will be 19.
She will be able to vote for the first time.
And like this generation needs to be empowered to understand that political participation is key.
And that number is about 1 million per year, by the way. So if election cycle is 4 years, that's almost 4 million new voters coming up every election cycle. So that gives me hope, in the sense that they have a future ahead of them. And if you have an inclusive society versus extractive society, it will be better for your future as well as your peers and the people all around the world. But another thing is, I don't think if we can take it for granted that younger generation all around the world will usually vote for inclusive progressive societies, like how it was during my time or your time, like in the past. And I was in America during the election, and we can see that it's not for granted that they'll vote for a particular person or a particular party just because they're young. So I think that's really a tough task ahead of political parties and politicians all around the world, to really, empathize with the youth before mobilizing the youth. I mean, all the questions that I guess when I appear in something like this is that how do you mobilize the first-time voter, or how do you mobilize the youth? And, before you mobilize, you have to empathize. In Thailand, they went through 2 military coups and 1 COVID crisis. They probably have seen their parents losing their jobs during the time and never recovered. So they are asking for that kind of system that is linked to the people and responds, rather than, a system where they allow 4 seconds to go vote and never responded again. So it's not just about democracy and election and campaign management, but the ability to really work on the ground 24/7 for 4 years, so that, there's linkages to the people and a quick response. It's about decentralization. It's about demonopolization so the economy works for everyone and not just the elites here in Thailand, for example. So lots of tasks and lots of work to be done. And you can't ever take it for granted that 90% of my daughter's generation will vote for me automatically, like how, political pundits would assume. Not the case for sure.
No, definitely.
Especially in Europe, especially in America, especially in Asia, especially in Japan in the past election. So you really have to, do exactly what democracy means. You really have to understand them. You really have to design policies for them. You have to really to make it happen for them.